Everybody, welcome back to the Anointed Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Terry Linscott. I'm so grateful once again to be joining me here. And this is a powerful set of topic today for leadership as we dive into it. I'm going to talk about 6 challenges every leader will face. These are challenges. Whether you lead a large organization or a small, you lead a mom and pop shop, or you're in the corporate world, whether your church is a new church launch and plant, or you have a mega church, and whatever thing you see and whatever you say, these are 6 leadership challenges every leader is going to face, I believe, in some part of our life, in our leadership. And so I want to dive into that content. But before I do, I love to ask people some help. One is if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. I really would appreciate that. Just hit that subscribe, hit the bell as a notification as well. Just so you know, we launch these every other Thursday. I can't just say twice a month because it could be whatever. So we launch them there, so you'll know to grab them on any platform that you have there. Also, I'd love for you to do one other thing for me is if this content adds value to you, your leadership, your team, do me a favor and hit me a comment, send me a review. You can go to my website, terrylinscott.com, and on the website, there's a way to communicate, contact us. It is an email that comes directly to me. I would love to review it, love to stay in contact with you, love to hear what this content's adding value to you. Also, if you want to be personal and anything I can do to help you personally in your leadership, I would love to do that. As well as if you would like for me to come in and help your church, help your business, speak to you guys, I would love to consider that option as well. There's a place on my website to do that. And lastly, just share this content with anybody that you think this would add value to. Share it on your Facebook, share it off of your YouTube, send a text message, share it in any form or fashion you can. Send emails, send them out to your whole teams, to pastors. I would really appreciate that. And so as we jump in today to the podcast, again, it's called 6 Challenges Every Leader Will Face. I really believe this. In James chapter 1, I'm a Bible guy. You know, it was funny. I preached a message not too long back, and I say this a lot, that I'm a Bible man. So I take everything in the Bible, I apply it to my life, and my life has been a complete success because of the biblical principles that I have followed in my personal life, in my marriage, in my parenting, and in my ministry. And it's all Bible. And somebody bought me a cup. It was awesome. Shout out to whoever you were. I got a coffee cup that's got Bible Man all over it. It's pretty cool, and I appreciate things like that. But I always want to pull from the scripture in leadership, because I think Jesus, who was the greatest leader of all time, he's the GOAT in leadership. And you say, how do you know that? And how do you believe that? Well, he took 12 men, unlearned, uneducated, what we would call the foolishness of the world to confound the wise, and he changed the globe. And we're still following him today because of those 12 men. Those 12 that took the teachings of Jesus directly is what we follow today. And so that's why I think so, and so I utilize his principles all the time. James 1:2-3 says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you face various trials." It doesn't say if you, it says when you, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that when you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. So we're all going to face some things. And evidently, according to that verse, everything I face is for my good. It's always to better me, to complete me, to mature me, to make me more seasoned, to make me a better leader, whatever that is. So I don't want to run from problems. I don't want to run from challenges. I want to run to them. I want to head on to them. Like David with Goliath. He didn't back up from the giant. He ran to the giant. And I think that's the thing in leadership, is so many things are designed to get us to withdraw from leading, to get us away from our task or our vision or our plan, whatever that looks like. But if we would run at those challenges, they're not against people. It's a challenge that should really sharpen our lives, right? We're all gonna, in every leadership, in every level of leadership, we're gonna face challenges to do that. But here's the thing, great leaders can lead despite the challenges. in spite of the challenges. However you want to say that. Great leaders lead no matter the challenge. We don't allow the challenge to eliminate us or in turn push us backwards. Great leaders lead despite or in spite. Here's why. They allow the challenges to sharpen their leadership skills rather than them to allow them to sink the ship. Those challenges in my life and in my ministry and in my church and in my businesses, I don't allow challenges to sink it. I don't just throw in the white flag. There's no white flag in my back pocket, right? I don't have the opportunity to surrender anything because I'm going forward in what I know God has called me to do. So in your leadership, in your church leadership, in your business leadership, throw out the white flags and allow every challenge to sharpen your leadership skills rather than define your inabilities. Come on, that's a good statement. Allow every challenge to sharpen you rather than define you. The challenges, the only way they define you is if you quit. But if you go through them, you won't even think about that challenge anymore because you've learned something. The next time you're confronted, you take what you've learned in the challenge and you apply it, right? Challenges will help determine where you still need growth. This is what I look at. This is how I look at it. Challenges simply show up and they are the tests, that blood test that show where am I lacking something in my life? Am I lacking iron? Am I lacking this? Am I lacking that? That's a test. That's all challenges are. They just help you determine where you need to grow. Because if it's a challenge, you haven't grown yet. If you're struggling in it, that means you haven't grown in it. Mature and complete means whenever that thing comes, I just go through it. It doesn't affect me in any form or fashion, right? Every great leader is always growing in their skill and ability to lead. That's great leadership. Good leaders plateau. Good leaders just get to a certain place and they think that's it. But every great leader is always growing in their skill and their ability to lead, not just their daily task, but the ability to lead. And so you and I have to build and develop this in our leadership. So what are the 6 challenges? Let's dive into that today. Let's really break this apart. I'm going to hope to give you a verse for each one of them, how you come out of it. But I really believe these are the 6 challenges that Terry Linscott has faced over 31 years in just any level of leadership that I've acknowledged. And number 1 is this: staying humble while staying confident. It's a challenge. Many leaders are very humble, which means I need help and I can't do this on my own. And they are very confident. And most of the time, confidence comes across as arrogance. And confidence is not arrogance. There's a difference in arrogance. Arrogance, it's all about me and my opinions. It only matters about me. I get the limelight. I get the glory. I get the exaltation. That's arrogance. Confidence isn't that. Confidence is knowing who you are and doing it. David was not an arrogant little teenage boy when he killed Goliath. However, when you study out 1 Samuel, Eliab, who is his older brother, which by the way was his father's first choice for the next kingship, is the one that confronted him and said, "Who do you think you are? I know what you're like." Basically saying, "You arrogant little cocky prick." That's kind of what he was saying is to David. And David didn't allow that, right, to affect him. But people don't always look at us and say that we are confident. They normally will say we're arrogant or prideful. The reality is confidence will look like pride to people that have a lower perception of themselves rather than in leadership. I'm a confident leader. Confidence in everything I say, yes to this and no to that. Here's my determined resolve to this situation. Confidence, not arrogant, but you got to stay humble while staying confident. And you've got to balance the two in that. Confidence and arrogance can be confused at times. Why? Because of that. Confidence, arrogance is, it's all about me, all about my opinions. Confidence is, I'm open to opinions. I'm open to other people's way of doing things. I'm not opposed to that. Doors open, come talk to me. However, confidence says this: I'm sure of the decision that needs to be made to get the outcome that we're desiring. There's a difference there. It's not that I don't need you to speak to me. It's not that I wouldn't consider that, but I understand the outcome and I understand the decisions that need to be made to get to the outcome. And your opinions are great. Your thoughts are great, but they just don't line up with the outcome. That's confidence. Arrogance says, don't even talk to me. There's a difference there. So you got to stay humble while I need people around me to help me to grow. This is a challenge, is I need people around me to help me grow, help me do what I'm supposed to do, take some things off of my plate so so I can do the things that I need to do. This is why we hire staff. This is why we have people around us. But that's humility, asking for the help. But you've got to stay confident even in the humility. Recognize those areas there, right? What happens and why I say this is a challenge is because when you become successful, it actually brings a big-headed mentality. Like it's exalting. My head's big, and everybody walks around and says, we got to pop his head. The reality is if you keep your head small by understanding humility, when confidence comes, it's applied at the right time. You don't have to deal with this, but you have to beat this. And this is what it means to stay humble while staying confident. Why? Because you got to always, always realize that you can't do what you do without others. This is how I stay humble. This is how I don't get into arrogance, right? Is you beat the big-headed mentality. And here's what I've learned is you can be replaced. This is one of the things that I've learned is you can be replaced. And so if you get too big and cocky, then you can be replaced, right? So in this idea that staying humble and staying confident is confidence and arrogance can be confused at times. You got to understand it. You got to understand that the success brings a big head. That's why you got to stay humble about it, right? Confidence is knowing where you came from as well as the value of what you bring to the table. So yeah, I know where I've come from, but I also know what I have I'm adding value to the table, right? Zechariah 4:6, great verse. This is how you beat it. Not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of the Lord. So what God has enabled me to do, He's doing this through me. And I'm not trying to do it on my own. This is how I beat the to stay humble and confident at the same time. Recognize that I can't do it by myself. I need help. And when you keep that mindset, then confidence is knowing the outcome of it, and you go after the outcome and every decision needed to make that happen. That's what we do. We don't eliminate other people or their opinions or their ways of doing it. We just determine it's not the right way to accomplish the task that we want to. Number two is you got to deal with anxiety and stress, a challenge for every leader. Every leader is thinking about the bottom line. Every leader is thinking about the outcome. Every leader is thinking about where we're going and every decision that we make to get there. And what if we make it wrong? What if the risk is too large? What if we step out of the boat and we don't walk on water type mindset? This is a challenge that we all deal with. And the reason why we deal with anxiety and stress, they stem from a few different things. I just wrote 4 thoughts. Number one, they stem from deadlines because it's pressure. And that's where stress comes from. If you think about the deadline rather than the task, when is it done? It's getting closer, it's getting closer. Get your eyes off of the deadline and just get it on the task. Second thing it comes from are impossibilities. Is where stress and anxiety comes. It comes because that's impossible. There's no way we're ever going to get to do it. Another one that comes from is inabilities, incompetence. I can't do this on my own. Stress and anxiety. How do I accomplish something I don't know how to do? Right? When I started shooting just simply these podcasts, this is one of those stressed moments in my life is because is anybody ever going to listen to me? Is it going to add value to anybody? Is this content going to be any good? How do I develop content when I don't even understand this stuff? That's where stress and anxiety comes from, and we all battle that. The last one is stress comes from because we didn't follow through. We halfway did it. That's where stress and anxiety comes from, and it stems from that, but we all deal with this challenge, is how do you beat anxiety? John chapter 14, verse 1, Jesus said this, do not let your heart be agitated. You believe in God, believe also in me. It's interesting that he says, this is how your heart doesn't become agitated by believing. In other words, he said, do not. That is a choice. So you can choose stress, you can choose agitation, you can choose anxiety, or you can choose peace. You can choose just balanced, ice in your veins type mindset, your hands not shaking. You choose it. It's up to you to do it. And inside of every one of those, it's a challenge we're going to face, right? A great leader, this is what I say about this. Great leaders, they have an emotional discipline about themselves. And this is a key component. You have to get your emotions in check. You gotta get your mind and your thought process established into who he is and who you are, and understand your role. This is what great leaders, when you know who you are, when you know your role, it helps eliminate some of these other things and other issues in your life. But I'm telling you, if you're going to move forward, you've got to beat this out of here. And it comes from having an emotional discipline. You've got to be able to take information and news and thoughts and the things that didn't follow through the way you thought they were, things that didn't happen the way you thought they were going to be. You're going to have to learn how to take those things and not bottle them, but how to utilize those things as sharpening mechanisms to help you grow in your personal life, right? So that you understand, this is what I mean by that. Great leaders don't allow information to change our mindset. That's what I mean by emotional discipline. Things that happen around me don't change my mindset. I know exactly what we're doing. I know where we're going, and I understand that sometimes things don't work out the way planned, right? But they don't change my emotion. I sleep well at night. I'm doing just fine. I don't have any irritation and agitation. Why? Because I am establishing myself in this idea of God, that I'm going to walk in peace. We all deal with anxiety. We all deal with stress in leadership. We do, because it's almost like the buck stops here. But what do we do? I love what Jeremiah 17:7-8 says. It says this: blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord and whose hope is in the Lord. Basically, I'm trusting in the Lord. Remember, not by might nor by power, but by his Spirit. This is what leadership looks like. And then it says he's like a tree that's planted by the rivers of water. And this is what it says: in droughts, in rains, in problems, the tree always flourishes. Why? Because, in other words, all of those situations that create stress and anxiety and pressures and the heat of the day, heat of the situation, we flourish, man. Why? Because we know how to deal with our emotional discipline with stresses and anxiety. We don't allow them to get to us. They are simply information to be able to make another decision. That's all it is. That's all the stuff that comes to us every day. And it should not allow us to not sleep at night. We should sleep really well when we just trust in the Lord, right? That's the idea of that. 6 out of 6 challenges. 1 is staying humble while staying confident. 2, dealing with anxiety and stress. It's a huge deal for leadership, right? 3, right? Keeping yourself and your team motivated. This is a challenge. How do you keep yourself and how do you keep your team motivated? And this is one of those things, right? That be motivated means that you value the vision and mission. I'm motivated for it. That's what motivates us. So what happens is the motivation for yourself, first of all, but for your team. When things aren't working the way they're supposed to, when there's a low morale in the team, when people are exhausted because you're overwhelmed with work, how do you keep motivating people? What does that look like? Here's the thing that I've learned is motivation comes when people believe in the vision, when they believe in the mission. When they believe it, they also have ownership in it. They take full responsibility to see the thing come to pass. Now it's an internal motivation rather than an external. The problem that I find with this right here, this is a challenge. Keep yourself and your team motivated. I don't know about you, but I've had the same thing. You have staff meetings. Are they even effective? You have briefings. Are they even effective? What's happening with people? What's their personal life like? What all's going on? What's happening? What headwind are we hitting into? What mountain is in front of us? What wall and obstacle? These are things that deplete energy and effort, right? And so how do you keep that? This is what I've learned is the value of the vision, the mission that's in their heart will create internal motivation. I'm not so focused on externally motivating people, though I do. Though I speak to them, I say some things to them, I encourage them in such great ways, in my opinion, but it's a challenge. So how do I do this, right? Staying motivated is simply a hard part. Overworked is as a cause of exhaustion, right? So when you overwork people, you overwhelm people, you do things like that. Certain things that I do, I pay for conferences to go. I pay their whole way. We take off on the weekends. We work really hard at times. I try never to attack or address certain things after hours unless they're just that urgent situation. I'm doing everything I can to give them permission to function during the work hour, and I'm leaving them alone at nights, even though I could probably contact them, but I'm doing everything I can. This is how I keep them motivated. Here's what I've learned, right, is that you got to balance yourself and the work with rest and play. You got to balance yourself, the work, rest, and play. There's a balance there. This is how you stay motivated, and this is how you help motivate them. Paul said something so profound in Romans chapter 1. He said, I'm obligated for the gospel. And then verse 15, he says this is why I am so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. Another translation says, that's why it's working in me to preach. In other words, it's internal, it's eagerness. You got to create value for your vision. You got to create value for the mission and put the value in the people that they have ownership. This is how you beat this challenge. But in it is a challenge we all face. We all face the challenge, right, of staying humble with confidence and staying confident. We also fight anxiety and stress. We also fight keeping yourself and your team motivated. It's a huge component about leadership, as you want people to you want the most out of people. They're not towels that we wring off water, but we want the most out of them, not to get from them, but to get into them, to help them reach their untapped potential. And that's what we look at. The fourth thing that I wrote down is this. It's a challenge to continue to grow in your own skill as a leader, not your competence, the ability to do things, but your leadership skill. It's a challenge we all face. Why? Because we're so focused on other people. We're so focused on leading people. We're so focused on pulling potential out of people. It's a challenge that we always face. And so what I've learned is that I can't just learn how to do the task or sharpen the skill of doing the task, but I've also got to sharpen my leadership. I've got to sharpen who I am, my character, my integrity, the person of Terry Linscott, not what Terry Linscott does. And when you understand this, when you grab a hold of this, this is an urgent matter. It's almost an emergency matter for most people because we don't work on it that way. But how do I do that? How do I balance and continue to grow in my leadership skill? That's a challenge we all face, and because it takes time. It takes effort to pour into myself. I really feel like that many great leaders understand the timing of their biological clock. I really do. I believe that you find out what your biological clock looks like and how it ticks. When is your best learning moments, when's your best doing moments, and when is your best I'm disconnecting moments. You find that because your body will tell you. God designed it. It'll tell you. For me, I'm a morning person. I get up early, I take a quick shower, I get to the office before everybody else, and I work really, really hard for an hour or hour and a half before I see anybody else. And then when I work during the day, I know I'm having interruptions. This is all I'm talking about. But my work isn't on the ministry or in it, it's working on me. I'm always working on Terry. I personally believe this in personal education in the scriptures. I personally believe that the greatest leader of all time is Jesus. So why not read his book, right? So I'm constantly investing in me. Why? It's a matter of life and death of my leadership. If I don't grow, then nobody else will grow around me. Why do I say that? Because you will be the ceiling to your team. You are the standard. If we talk church life, just for a second, the Bible says that we're made righteous because of Jesus, but holiness is up to you. He says, be holy as I'm holy. That's not you are holy. That means you have a responsibility to be holy. So if my standard of living as a pastor, the people that follow me will normally live up to my standard, even though Jesus should be the standard. But most of the time, the people that follow me will do what I do, say what I say. The conviction that I have, they'll adopt as their own conviction. Why? Because that's what leadership does. So what I have to do is raise my level of holiness, my level of obeying God, submitting to the scriptures. I have to. Why? If not, I'm the ceiling. And if I'm the ceiling, then I have to give an account for everybody under my leadership, right? So here's what I do. I never settle. I never settle where I am. I'm always going to be what I call the Timothy. Timothy was one of the greatest disciples in the new covenant that becomes a pastor. And this is what I mean is you're never too old to learn. You're always learning. You're always gaining. You're always critiquing yourself. How do I do that? I do things like this. I listen to podcasts, not just do podcasts. I read books that sharpen the skill of leadership in Terry. How do I deal with people? How do I help people? What does that look like? And so that's what we're looking at in this situation, right? So this is how I do it. And I'll give you a verse, Philippians 2:12. You all know this. Maybe you haven't. You've heard it, I'm sure. Continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That means you're constantly working on yourself. The fear and trembling isn't working on the task. It's working on you. So you have to be determined, resolute, that you're going to grow and raise the roof of your leadership, which then raises the roof of your whole team. One, what do we get through is stay humble while stay confident. Two, you gotta, it's a challenge dealing with anxiety and stress in your leadership. Three, you gotta keep yourself and your team motivated. It's a challenge. Four, it's a challenge to constantly grow. Five is you gotta deal with conflict. This is a challenge. This is the hard part because you're always gonna have conflict. If you never have conflict, you have yes people. Yes, people go nowhere because you're all in the same opinion. Nobody's coming into you and saying, what about this? What about that? I mean, look at Jesus. He had to deal with conflict because Peter didn't want him to go. Judas betrayed him. Thomas didn't believe in him. That's all conflict. And how do you deal with it? We all are going to have to deal with conflict, and it's a challenge for us because we don't like to. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We think that where there's conflict, there's no peace. The reality is conflict actually brings peace. It brings us to a place of balance and seeing eye to eye about certain things. It also sharpens who we are, right? I say this a lot, and I really believe this. Whatever you won't confront, you can't change. So in your team and in your leadership, if there's something that needs to be changed, it requires confrontation. Confrontation is simply conflict, and you've got to deal with conflict. It's a stressor in some of our lives, right? Being a relational leader isn't difficult due to friendship. It's not difficult due to friendship. You got to learn how to wear many hats. Confrontation isn't personal. That's what we have to understand. It's to accomplish the mission of the vision. That's what we realize when we deal with this. What am I saying? What the Bible says in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, if a brother sins against you, go to them. This is what conflict is. In other words, if it's creating fault, if it's something against you, something that you disagree with, something that hurts you in your teams, if you can't get eye to eye on something, you can't agree on something, how can two walk together unless they agree? On your church, in your business, on your team. If the conflict is okay, how do you deal with it? You confront it right away. This is a stress. It's a challenge, but we are instructed that the only way through that stress, through that challenge, is to confront. Go to them and point it out and deal with it. Don't walk away. And then it says this, if you can't work it out, but go get another leader and bring it. We shouldn't have to get to the second part of that as mature leaders, as great leaders. We're unwilling to allow this thing to continue, that we must confront it. Why? Because we understand if it's not confronted, we're going to have problems down the road. So we got to realize it's a challenge. This is a challenge for leadership, and it's one of the ones you're going to face. But if you'll confront them, I promise you that you will find greater success and victories on the other side of that. Number 6, the last one, it's a challenge. And I think it's really important. I did one on this right here, a podcast, I think, but I'm just going to highlight it again. Communication. It is a challenge for leadership. Why? Because we have so much going on in our mind. And then this would be a great excuse to just appease us and think that it's okay, but it's really not. We have so much going on in our mind. We have so many things going through our head. Some of us don't even sleep at night because of what's going on in our head. We don't rest well. And so we think that because we know something, and we gave one instruction, that everybody should interpret the instruction based on what's on our head. And that does not work, right? This is the make it or break it factor in business, in leadership, in church. Lack of communication will destroy a ministry, it'll destroy a business, it'll destroy a company, it'll destroy it. If there's no communication, that the processes, what does it all look like? Because paper trail is great. It really is. And that will help us. We're in the process in our own ministry of adjusting some processes. And paper trail is great. Having a book and a binder is great. But if they don't understand it, that's the problem. The Bible says, though that you know something, wisdom's the supreme thing, but though it costs you everything, get understanding. You can write everything down and you can put it down and they can read it. But if they interpret it differently without an understanding, that's the fault of the leader who didn't communicate. This is how it gets done, right? So you have to realize that paper trail is great, but face-to-face is emotional equity. They get it. They understand it. They grasp the hold of it. We want to deal with this, right? Because when you're face-to-face, now you're articulating the vision. And when you teach, you can read the vision, and that's great. But if you catch the vision, catching it only comes from communicating, talking about it, dealing with it, speaking about it. That's how people catch it, because they get the emotion, they get the heartbeat, they get everything that burns with great passion of the leader. Communication is a challenge because we feel like we don't have time to communicate everything. The reality is, if you'll communicate everything in a timely fashion, you'll have greater success on the other side. How do you communicate though? There's disbursement. I'm telling you, this is me telling you, I'm communicating to you from this podcast, this content that builds your leadership. Disbursement would be me retrieval would be me receiving from you or asking you to spend time talking to me. There's a difference. What we want to do is be the faucet all the time. But the reality is you're going to have to be the drain as well at times. You're going to have to go get from somebody else. That's proper communication. James 1:19, it says it this way. Hey, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. In other words, that proper communication requires listening and speaking, and that eliminates frustration, irritation, and agitation. When you can nail down your communication, it's a challenge every leader has. And when you do it properly, go back and listen to my podcast. It's about communication, and I did one on this whole topic. And if you'll get this right, I promise you, a lot of these other things will come over a lot easier and much more successful in that. Let me review. The 6 challenges that I believe that every leader deal with is 1, staying humble while staying confident. 2, dealing with anxiety and stress. 3, keeping yourself and your team motivated. 4, continuing to grow your own skills as a leader. 5, dealing with conflict. And 6, communication. Hey, I hope this content helps you. Go apply these things to your life. Go apply them to your leadership. Go address every one of these. And when they come, take some of these simple thoughts and apply them. And I promise you, you'll get over it easier. Hey, until next time, this is Terry Linscott, host of the Anointed Leadership Podcast. I'm believing God that He is anointing it all over you and helping you do everything He's called you to do.